So what if that familiar, gentle, branching tree of life isn't the whole story? What if evolution is less like a patient gardener and more like a relentless, powerful, and yeah, even aggressive computer program? An algorithm that's been running, debugging, and optimizing life for close to 4 billion years. Today, we're going to dive deep into the raw mechanics of that very algorithm. The philosopher Daniel Dennett, he famously called Darwin's idea a universal acid, and honestly, it is the perfect metaphor. This one concept is so potent that it just dissolves our most basic ideas about purpose and design and humanity's special place in the universe. It forces a complete rewiring of how we see, well, pretty much everything. So why is it so challenging, so corrosive? What is it about this idea that really gets under our skin? I think it's because it shatters that comforting idea of some grand designer, and instead, it gives us a cold, impersonal, bottom-up algorithm. And for a lot of people, that can be a pretty terrifying thought.
All right, so we're about to jump right into the heart of this thing, and here's the map for our journey. First, we'll start with that corrosive concept itself. Then we'll unpack the actual algorithm that drives it. After that, we'll witness some of the great intellectual battles fought over how it works, explore life's surprisingly cooperative side, and then we'll confront the biggest modern challenge to evolution, and finally wrap it all up in the vast crucible of deep time.
You know, for centuries, the incredible beauty of a hummingbird's wing or the just stunning complexity of the human eye was held up as undeniable proof of a master artist. The real power of Darwin's acid is that it doesn't just admire the masterpiece, it dissolves it, and it reveals the raw, mechanical, and totally unguided process that actually built it. It was the first truly compelling, purely natural explanation for how you get design without a designer.
And that brings us to what is probably the single biggest misconception about evolution, that it's all just random chance. The idea that something as complex as an eye could just happen randomly is, let's be honest, completely absurd. And you know what? Skeptics of evolution are 100% right to point that out. But here's the thing. That's not what the theory claims at all.
Yeah, this slide right here gets to the absolute heart of it. It shows the massive difference between pure chance and what's called cumulative selection. Relying on chance alone is like hoping a hurricane ripping through a junkyard will somehow assemble a Boeing 747. It's statistically impossible. It's not going to happen. Evolution, though, is a cumulative process. Think of it like climbing a mountain in a thick fog. You can't see the top, but every single step you take is slightly uphill. The initial genetic mistakes, the mutations, those are random. But the selection part, the uphill part, that is the absolute opposite of random. And this is just a brilliant way to show the power of that algorithm. Richard Dawkins actually wrote a simple computer program to illustrate this. If it tried to generate the phrase, "Methinks it is like a weasel," by pure random chance, it would take, literally, longer than the age of the universe. But when the program keeps the correct letters each round and only randomizes the wrong ones, that's cumulative selection, it nails the target in just 43 tries. 43? The algorithm works because it preserves its wins.
And that powerful insight leads us to Dawkins' most famous metaphor. You know the old argument, right? If you find a complex watch on the ground, you know there had to be a watchmaker. Well, Darwinism doesn't argue with that. It just says the watchmaker is blind. It's this unconscious, automatic process that produces breathtaking complexity without any goal, without any plan, or any foresight whatsoever.
Okay, but even if we can all agree on the blind watchmaker, the journey is far from over. In fact, some of the most ferocious intellectual battles have been fought not against the idea of evolution itself, but over how exactly it works. And the most famous of these was the incredible clash between two giants of biology, Richard Dawkins and Stephen Jay Gould.
And their whole debate, which got nicknamed the Darwin Wars, really hinged on this one deceptively simple question. When natural selection is doing the selecting, what is it actually choosing? Is it the gene? Is it the individual organism? Or is it the entire species? And believe me, how you answer that question changes everything.
So you've basically got two titans in the ring here. On one side, you have Dawkins, the champion of the selfish gene. He argues that our bodies are just these elaborate survival machines, vehicles, really, that our immortal DNA builds to make more copies of itself. So in this view, an act of selfless altruism might just be a gene's clever trick to help copies of itself survive in your relatives. But on the other side, you have Gould, the holistic thinker. He fired back, whoa, hold on. You can't just reduce everything down to the gene.
He argued that organisms have their own histories and their own limits. He said selection happens at multiple levels and that evolution doesn't always happen slow and steady, but in these long periods of stability that are punctuated by sudden rapid change. But while the Darwin Wars were raging over competition, a quieter, and maybe even more profound, revolution was brewing. This one challenged the whole idea of individual struggle being the only engine of evolution, and instead, it focused on radical cooperation. And this quote from the brilliant and, frankly, tenacious biologist Lynn Margulis, I mean, wow. This isn't just a minor tweak to the tree of life we all learned in school. This is a complete reimagining of how life's complexity gets built. It suggests that the biggest leaps forward didn't come from branching out, but from fusing together. So get this. Her big idea was called endosymbiosis, and it is a wild one. Just imagine a microbial world, billions of years ago, where the lines between predator and prey just kind of blurred. A larger cell swallows a smaller bacterium, but instead of digesting it, the little guy survives inside and becomes a permanent partner. Together, they create a brand new, way more complex form of life. And this wasn't just a one-off fluke. This was the origin story for the very cells that make us us. And if you're thinking, that sounds like science fiction, well, the proof is literally inside every single one of your cells right now. Those mitochondria that power your body, they have their own separate circular DNA, a dead giveaway of their free-living bacterial ancestors. Same thing with the chloroplasts that power plants. We are all living, breathing examples of this ancient radical alliance. We are, in a very real sense, walking, talking colonies. So, this idea of life being built on these incredible mergers, it helps explain some of the huge leaps in evolution. But it also opens the door to another big question. What about the truly complex little machines of life? The ones that seem so perfectly interconnected that they couldn't possibly have been built piece by piece. And that brings us to this concept called irreducible complexity. The argument basically goes like this. Some biological systems are like a finely tuned machine. If you remove even a single part, the whole system just fails completely. So the argument goes, it couldn't have been built up gradually, because any step along the way would have been useless and gotten weeded out by selection.
And the classic analogy everyone uses is a simple mousetrap. Think about it. It has what, 5 interconnected parts? You take away the spring, it's not a poorly working mousetrap, it's not a mousetrap at all. It's just a pile of junk. The claim is that some things in biology are just like this and therefore must have been designed all at once.
But here's the scientific rebuttal, and it's a devastatingly simple one: co-option. The poster child for this whole argument was the bacterial flagellum, this amazing little molecular motor. Proponents claimed it was irreducibly complex. But it turns out, if you remove most of its parts, you're not left with junk. You're left with a perfectly functional, simpler machine called a type 3 secretory system, which bacteria actually use as a kind of tiny syringe. Evolution is a tinkerer, not an engineer. It grabs existing, useful parts and just repurposes them for brand new functions.
So, what's the final word on this? Well, in a landmark 2005 court case in the U.S., Kitzmiller v. Dover, this very claim was put on trial, and it was found to be unscientific. The judge's ruling was crystal clear, noting that the idea has been thoroughly refuted in peer-reviewed research and is rejected by the overwhelming consensus of the scientific community.
Okay, so how do we pull all these threads together? The relentless algorithm of selection, the fierce debates over what it's selecting, the revolutionary power of cooperation. To really get a handle on the power of this process, we need to appreciate the one key ingredient we haven't really talked about yet: time. And not just any time, but vast, almost unimaginable deep time.
The thing is, our brains, we just aren't wired to really comprehend billions of years. But let's try. If you squeeze Earth's entire 4.5 billion year history into a single 24-hour day, the first simple life shows up around 4 a.m., but nothing more complex than algae appears until about 8 p.m. The dinosaurs show up around 11 p.m. and are gone 40 minutes later. And all of recorded human history, from the first written words to the screen you're watching this on, flashes by in the final split second before midnight. The improbable starts to look almost inevitable when the algorithm has that much time to run.
And I think this brings us to a really powerful final thought. Darwin's universal asset doesn't have to be some destructive force that strips the world of meaning. It can be the foundation for a new and really profound sense of awe. It's a story that suggests that complexity and consciousness and creativity, they aren't gifts handed down from on high. They are achievements earned from the ground up. A story of how we rose from the dust, forged in an algorithmic crucible across an abyss of time.